Hi, my name's Matt and I'd like to welcome you to this Zindiac video on the engage step of the customer journey and particularly collaboration and communication. This is part of our ITIL specialist course, Drive Stakeholder Value. Let's start off by looking at the purpose of the engage step, which is to build transparency, continual engagement and trust between stakeholders to ensure a mutual understanding of preferences and experience. And we're going to break each of those items down for you as we go through the video. All stakeholders are successful when they foster and sustain an environment for collaboration and trust. Because a high level of trust, a customer tends to increase demand, effectively contributing to value co-creation. And if you go on Amazon and do a search for trust economy, there's a book written about the trust economy and how important trust is in business and in creating value. In order for you to watch this video, to take this training course, you needed to trust Zindiac. So when you went to the Zindiac website and purchased the course, you needed to trust that when you handed over your credit card details or paid with PayPal, you were transferring digital money, but you were transferring money to us, that you were going to get the course, that the course was accredited, which it is, and that we were going to provide you with the exam voucher, which is part of the course. So that trust is important. Equally, we need to trust you that when we provide those things that we do actually get the funds into our account. So trust is a two-way communication. It's a two-way thing between two parties, and it's really important for providing service. And the greater the trust is, the more we can do business together. So obviously, once you've taken the course, if you feel the course is good, then you're more likely to trust us and do further courses with us and so on. And if you receive the support you need when you need it and so on, it's building that trust to create the value. A service provider that does well acquires the resources to create and deliver a quality product or service for the service consumer. This strengthens its competitive advantage. Yeah, so I mean that's the £200 gorilla thing, where the more business you get, the more money you've got to invest in future products and services. So if you're doing well as a service provider, you'll have more resources, you'll be able to produce higher quality products that will deliver more value to your customers, that should get you more customers. So that gets you into a virtuous cycle that grows your business, and that's what we're looking for. So how do we differentiate between low trust and high trust relationships? A low trust relationship is fixed, documented and regulated. And certainly in a service provider setting, I've always felt that if we've had to refer to the contract, we produce the contract, and obviously we produce a service level agreement, but in the monthly review, when I'm reviewing performance with my customer, if we're going back and looking at the SLA and kind of, oh, well, did you meet it, did you not, and what about this and what about that, and getting involved in the contract, things aren't going. That's not where we want to be. That's a low trust relationship. Yes, of course you do need the legal backing in big IT outsourcing contracts, but really what you want is that high trust relationship, which is more flexible, more interaction, easier collaboration, where you're really talking about what do you need us to do, what you're trying to do in business, how can we help you, and the kind of meeting the SLA is almost taken for granted. You don't want to be going into that regulated relationship. If you get there, it's a sign it's breaking down. It's not enough to meet a stakeholder's actual need for outcomes. So obviously that's important. We need to do that. That's a key part of providing a service, helping the stakeholder achieve the outcome they want without managing specific costs and risks. So obviously we do need to do that, but the stakeholder needs to trust the service provider to provide a certain level of service and improve it over time. And so it's not just about doing it on day one or even day 10 or day 100. I could set up an organisation. It's very easy to set up a new company. I could set up a new company and provide some cloud-based service and say, this cloud-based service is going to be available 100% of the time. And I could run it off a server in my garage. And for a period of time, it would be 100% available until it wasn't. Yeah, and actually it might go quite a long time before it wasn't. But if people had put their trust in me, then obviously when it wasn't, when it failed, they would be disappointed. They would feel their trust was misplaced. So you've got to have that trust that actually, if I'm saying I'm offering 100% availability on a service, that actually I'm doing the things we need to do technologically, that it's really very likely that I can provide that service. I'm not just kind of crossing my fingers and hoping that I have got, not just a single server, but I've got resilience in there. So I've got clusters, I've got dual data centers, I've got dual diverse network feeds into the data centers and so on and so forth. So all the things we do to make our services more resilient, I have done if I'm saying I'm offering you 100% availability. And I think probably as well, to make that, as we said before, having that transparency of not just saying it, but telling you what I'm doing and saying, look, there are still risks. There is the possibility that both data centers go down or all network goes, but it's very unlikely. In that scenario that would take our service down, if you can't access our service, then the chances are you can't access any service because the internet's down or your network connection's down. But having that transparency as well as to what we're doing. So not just saying this is what we do, but this is how we do it. The parties must have a shared understanding of expectations. I've spoken before about how important it is that we set expectations and that we have shared expectations, so that otherwise, you can very easily be disappointed. I know on our website, one of the things I try and set is an expectation about chat. I know people might feel, it's chat, so they're going to respond straight away. And as much as I can, I try and indicate to people on our website that we can't respond to chat straight away necessarily. So we may sometimes, but basically we're working UK office hours 8 till 8, and even then, within that, it's not necessarily immediate. It might be, but it might take us half an hour or even an hour to respond, but we always respond. So I'm trying to set that expectation, and it's important you try and do that. A good relationship fosters and reveals expectations of outcomes, experiences, and preferences. Those of you who are familiar with ITIL version 3 will be familiar with this diagram, with this figure 4.1 on the slide, except in version 3 it had outcomes, preferences, and perceptions. So they've changed perceptions to experiences. And yeah, what it's looking at is outcomes are important, but it's not just the outcomes. I have preferences about maybe how the outcome is achieved sometimes, and we need to take those into account. And then the experience really is that perception, but it's the experience. And in previous videos, we talked about what people remember. So it's part of that experience. When relationships break down, business relationships or even personal relationships, it's about those experiences and maybe the bad experiences or the negative experiences playing a bigger part in your memory, so you remember those more, and therefore the relationship breaks down. So we do need to understand all those contribute to service value, and if there is a negative incident, shall we say, trying to avoid it becoming a negative experience. So incidents will happen, but they don't necessarily have to be negative experiences. And quite often, if you provide, and this is one of the things I've definitely found with service provision, is if you have really good incident management, really good service desk incident management, and do that really well, then yes, you will get incidents. As I said, all services have incidents, but when you get the incident, if you deal with it really well, it becomes a positive experience. A little while ago now, but a new restaurant opened in the town where I lived, and my wife took me there for my birthday, and we had an incident there with the food. So the kind of food came, and her food wasn't right, so she had to send it back. So that was an incident, but the way they handled it was really good, and they turned it into a positive experience for us, largely by giving us lots of free stuff. So they kind of took her meal away, they took mine away as well, and brought 2 fresh meals back. So we both had fresh food to eat together, which was good. But they gave us kind of free desserts and free drinks and things, but generally just made it a positive experience. So yes, there was an incident, but they handled it in such a way it became a positive experience rather than negative. And so that gave us great service value and left us satisfied rather than dissatisfied customers. Prejudice and wrong assumptions are threats to success. And assumptions, definitely there's I don't know if you've seen it, there's a way of kind of putting lines through assumptions of if you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. So if you write assume, you can turn assume into ass, you and me. And it is true. Assumptions ultimately are risks, because you're assuming something's going to happen and it might not. And where there's uncertainty is risk, and therefore we need to mitigate it. And the best way to mitigate assumptions are to bring certainty where there is uncertainty. I say, well, you've assumed this, or I'm assuming that. Is that correct? Check it. Remove the assumption and confirm that the assumption's correct or false. And obviously, if it's false, then we need to change what we're going to do. Engage early to start clarifying and communicating mutual assumptions and expectations. And it's important to do that early, because what you don't want to do is waste a lot of time and get to a point where you say, oh, you assume we could do that, well, we can't, so it's over. Or I have this expectation, you can't meet it, right, okay, it's over. Or yes, we can do that, but it's going to cost you more money, or it's going to have this impact on you in some way. So again, it's don't put your head in the sand. Don't think that's not going to come up. It will come up. So it's better to get it out in the open and discuss it and communicate around that early. So we're going to look at communication and collaboration. Communication is a fundamental for building relationships and trust. Effective communication is especially important in the engage step, as that is when initial expectations are formed. Poor communication can ruin good intentions and lead to costs, delays, unnecessary disputes, and poor service delivery. And you may have, examples of that yourself, where there's been a miscommunication and you've got some way into the service, and then people, well, we agreed you were going to do that. Oh no, we didn't agree we were going to do that. I remember having an extension or on my house built, and we'd got a quote, and the quote included kind of covering up pipe work. So any pipe work was supposed to be covered and done. And the builder did the work, and then there was some exposed pipe work. And I said, no, on the quote, you need to cover it up. So they did cover it up, but then when they sent us the bill, they put extra on for covering this pipe work up, and it was like, well, no, the original quote said it covered that. No, that wasn't the pipe work we meant. We meant this pipe work. And it was like, no, it was all pipe work. And we had a dispute over that, whether it was all pipe work or just some pipe work. The effectiveness of communication depends on the type of relationship between those communicating. So this is important. This is something I think might come up in the exam. The difference between cooperation and collaboration. So when we're collaborating, the two parties have the same goal. So they're the same objective. They're collaborating to achieve the same ends. When we're cooperating, we're working together, but we have kind of different objectives. Our goals and objectives aren't as aligned. So for Zindiac, we collaborate with PeopleCert and Axelos because our goals, our objectives are aligned. They're the same. They are to train you in ITIL so that you can pass the certification exam, so you can get an ITIL certification and you can increase your personal capital and improve your CV and develop your career. Yeah, so all three organisations are trying to do that. We're all aligned, we're collaborating. I have other organisations I work with, like my bank, my accountant, the various software companies who provide me with software, whether it's Xero or Podia, Apple, Google, I collaborate with for apps. But we're cooperating, we're not collaborating. We're working together, but their goals aren't quite the same. They're not as focused on the same objectives as Zindiac are. So that's the difference. So obviously, collaboration, as it says, higher potential for creative and entrepreneurial work in a complex environment. If you're all pulling in the same direction, trying to achieve the same goal, you can be more entrepreneurial, you can be more agile. If you've got different goals, then that's cooperation. Effective for standardized work with a clear separation of duties. You're going to do this, I'm going to do that. Especially when multiple organisations work together. So they've both got a place. We do both. They're not, one's better than the other. They're just one's more appropriate in different areas than the other. To communicate and collaborate effectively, be aware of cultural differences, language barriers, and time zones. And we will come on to that again later in more detail. Probably, arguably, the most important part of communicating is listening. My first sales manager said to me, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth and you should use them in that proportion. So you should be listening twice as much as you're speaking. Now, that wouldn't do me much good in this situation because I can't listen to you right now. But generally, when we're communicating, that's, if it's face to face, then that's a really good way of thinking about it. I want to be listening twice as much. So listening is really important. You can improve it through practice and training. Poor listening definitely causes mistakes, misunderstandings, and cooperation failures. And in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I'm sure you're all aware of, Covey described 5 different modes of listening. So he had ignoring, pretend listening, selective listening, attentive listening, and empathetic listening. So ignoring is you're not actually listening, you're not even making any attempts, you're just ignoring them. Pretend listening, pretending you're listening, but you're not really. Selective listening, only listening to the parts that interest you. And I'm sure we've all done that at some point where you kind of, maybe some other people are talking and you kind of, and it's only if they say something interesting, you go, oh, that sounded interesting. What did you say? I'll join in now. Attentive listening, paying attention and focusing on what the speaker says. But empathetic listening is not just listening to what the speaker says literally, but how they say it and the emotional context of what they're saying. And that's very important, that we get the whole intent of what they're saying. This scale can be simplified further into 3 basic listening modes. So this is the Axelos view. They've taken those 5 types of listening and really combined the the first three into internal listening. So internal listening is focused on me. It's all I'm thinking about is me. So I'm listening for my benefit, and I'm going to choose to listen to what I want to listen to or not, and I'm not really bothered about the speaker. Focused listening is where I'm paying attention to what you're saying, but it's just what you're saying. So I'm not thinking about the outside world. I'm not thinking about the context. I'm not thinking about your emotions or how you're expressing what you're saying. Global listening is where I'm taking everything into account, and that's really important that we understand the context of what's been said, and how it's been said, and that we don't misunderstand people. And it's very easy to. I notice on social media, particularly because it's not speaking, it's it's reading and texting. It's very difficult to spot sarcasm and so on. And sometimes you read something and think, well, have they been serious, or is that satire? Is that supposed to be satire? I'm not really sure. And you can have that in work. I remember one instance. I was working as a project manager, and a lady on my team came to see me. It was kind of mid-morning, and she came up to me and said, "My son's been taken to hospital. Is it all right if I leave early, if I leave at lunchtime to go and see him?" And I said, "Well, don't wait till lunchtime. Go now. What are you still doing here? Go now. Your son's far more important than this project." And she kind of looked at me, and it was obvious to me that she wasn't sure if I was being serious or not, if I was kind of being somehow sarcastic or something. So I looked at her and said, "No, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being funny. I really mean it. Your son is more important than this project. Please leave now. Don't come back. You don't need to come back today. I hope your son's okay. Let us know. Be careful, but leave now." And she kind of looked at me and said, "Oh, thanks." And then she went off, and thankfully her son was okay. And a couple of days later, she was back in the office, and we kind of discussed it. And she said, and I said, when I originally said for you to go, you seemed not sure if I was serious or not. And she said, "Yeah, it's just unusual because people don't normally say that. People don't normally say that your son's more important than the project." She felt the environment we were working in, that work was all important, and there was no balance, and so she was surprised. So I had to kind of spell it out for her. That was like, "No, your son's far more important than whatever IT. I can't even remember the project now. What specifically, some IT thing we were doing, some system we were implementing or whatever. But yeah, so you got to make sure you're aware of what people are saying, but also when you say things, are people taking you out of context or not understanding the context within which you're saying whatever it is. So last thing, diversity. So I did say we'd come back to this. Many factors should be considered when cooperating, including cultural differences and language. And that's a couple of things. I used to work as a global account manager, so it was really across Europe, really, but internationally. And the company I worked for, they sent me on a multicultural communication course to kind of help with the multicultural communication. And there were certain things where in the UK, things that would be seen as rude or disrespectful in other countries were perfectly normal and acceptable, and vice versa, and vice versa. So different cultures, and some of them you'll be kind of aware of. I remember the one thing they said, partly because I used it later, was that Japanese people, and I don't know how true this is, but I was told Japanese people, when they hand you a business card, which tends not to happen too much anymore, but that you need to treat it with kind of respect, that they see it as an important thing, and you kind of need to, oh yeah, you've read it and take care of it. I'm going to put it here and take care of it. It's an important thing. Whereas maybe in the UK, you kind of get a business card and just go, yeah, fine. Stick it in your pocket and not really even bother. Yeah, fine. Okay, there's mine. It's not an important thing. So those sorts of cultural differences, language, particularly international English as well. If we are communicating internationally, use international English. Try and not use idioms. If English is your first language, try and not use idioms and the whole 9 yards and all those things. Time zones and locations. Yeah, so be aware of when people are communicating with you and what time of day it is for them. I know sometimes when I'm got chat on the website, I'll have to I'll be chatting away and helping someone. It's fine. I'm at home. I've got a laptop on my lap, and I'm maybe watching TV in the background and whatever. But sometimes I do have to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go to bed now. It's 11:30 and I really need to go to sleep now. Seasonal factors, for example, summer vacations. Yeah, so people have holidays at different times, and obviously things like religious festivals and so on. So be aware of those differences. And organisational culture. Yes, so how people dress or not. I remember in kind of 2000, kind of start of the dot-com boom. I still, at that point, I was still very much suited and booted, white shirts, tie, and I started having meetings where entrepreneurs would come in wearing Motorhead t-shirts and Doc Martens and shorts, and it was kind of like, oh, I feel like there's too much of a difference in culture, and I needed to dress down a bit. So I didn't start wearing Motorhead t-shirts and Doc Martens, but I did kind of tone down my dress a bit, so it wasn't quite as big a gap. It is always important to foster a respectful attitude. Absolutely, use the right language, create an environment where it is safe to express all perspectives. What I would say about that is, what we don't want is people fearful of saying or doing the wrong thing, and I think sometimes it can get too far and go into that area. So what we want is a safe environment where everyone is trying to be respectful, no one is trying to offend anyone else, but sometimes that incidents happen. Yeah, so if an incident happens in that sense, I say something that offends someone else, then it should be a safe environment where they can say, oh, I'm a bit offended by that, and I can say, oh, I'm terribly sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, why did you find that offensive? And then I can, please forgive me, I will try not to do that again because I don't want to offend you. My experience, my life experiences didn't lead me to think that would offend anyone, but it's clearly offended you. I didn't want to. I will try not to do that again. That's got to be okay. It's got to be okay to address it in that way, not have people think, oh, I don't want to say anything because I might offend someone. That's gone too far. Finish with actionable conclusions and continually align as the work proceeds. Yes, so that's very much, even if we're perfect today, we won't be perfect tomorrow because the world changes. So we've got to continue align, continual improvement, key part of Axelos ITIL. Right, so that brings us to the end of this video on the engage step. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Please join me in the next video. Until you see me again, have a great day.